Hey everyone, welcome back to Design Workshop. I'm Val. Today I'm working on a design for a frost giant. So my idea with this one goes way back to the first frost giant I ever really saw in fantasy, or I suppose in general. Fantasy would have to be the first place you see one. But so the first frost giant I ever saw was in an old, excellent Sierra adventure game called Quest for Glory, and I loved him as a concept. The whole point of that game, without spending too much time on it, is that there's a number of things you need to do, not necessarily in any order, and you can handle them in whatever way you like. There's usually 2 or 3 ways to handle any situation. And so you bump into this frost giant. He's just this big hulking creature. He's huge, he's got just his axe on the ground, but he doesn't attack you. And as a kid, I remember that really blew me away. The idea that you would see him and he was like, I don't want to fight you, you're not my business. It's not that he's even disregarding you, he just has something else he's worried about. And if you speak to him, he's looking for food. He's come down from the north because he's hungry, because it's the winter season. And it's like, it's made clear in the game that he's generally causing problems, but nobody really knows what to do about him, and you can fight him. If you're badass enough, you can work through the whole game to get strong enough to actually beat him in a fight. Or you can get him food, which you can steal or buy or whatever kind of suits you. And if you do that for him, he just sort of thanks you and leaves, and that's kind of it. And what that left me with was this idea, the storytelling idea, that something doesn't always need to be physically surmountable in order to be a good character. And I know that seems like something obvious, but it was a huge realization to me as a kid. So coming back to that as an adult and working on, this is kind of an older design of mine, but it's one I've always loved, and it's always been something of a white whale for me, because it's this awesome design that I've never been able to truly utilize, but it's one that I liked enough to share with you. So here it is. So that's Wagland is his name. So I drew this character. First off, the design elements I had in mind with him were these very, very pillar-like. I wanted him to be this very tall and visually tall as well, not just if you put him next to somebody. I want you to look at him and have all of the elements on him also be things that kind of stretch out. So he's got, like, his chainmail is in kind of stripes, and he's wearing these leather bits that hang, and he has the greatsword, which I'll get to later, but, like, everything about him just makes him feel like this very, very angular creature, not necessarily wide or stocky, but just altitude. And what I wanted to convey with this character is the simple idea that power does not equate to magic. It's always been one of my big hang-ups in fantasy worlds is they get so over the top so quickly. I love fantasy, but so often it comes down to the magic this and the great that and the superpowered this guy, and you need the magic whatever to beat the thing of the... Something as simple as just one giant. That's a threat that can make a hero. You don't need... It's that older style of storytelling. In your traditional folk tales, very rarely does a hero go on collect 500 different crazy things to beat a dude, to fight a guy that does this to beat that and this thing and whatever to beat some giant demon. They have one large thing that's outrageous to a normal person. And I feel like storytelling-wise, people have become sort of desensitized to that. You could tell an amazing story about a regular group of people beating one frost giant with no special powers. Now, with that in mind, this guy, I don't imagine he has any special powers either, beyond being a frost giant. He's got the size, and I guess he's probably cold. Like, I imagine being around him would, like, chill your bones. Not in a crippling way, but just you would feel that sort of fatiguing chill. The other thing I had in mind with him from a design aspect is I wanted to have a character that felt intimidating with a greatsword. I've always had this sort of weird relationship with greatswords in that I like them conceptually, but when they're used very casually, they lose some of their impact. A character, somebody fighting with a it's inhuman how big and heavy they are. Even the ones that existed in real life were very large, and they weren't super common because a normal sword and a shield does the job better. You'd have to be someone truly amazing to use a sword like that, because in real life, they're very impractical. There's things about them that are cool. You can use it like a spear, you can bash people at the end of it, you can use it like a club. Like, it's very versatile, but it's a weapon you have to know how to use. So when I see it very casually in fantasy, you can just have a bunch of people running around in greatswords. There's very rarely any disadvantage to it. And it's a very common thing that somebody would use it and it's just better, or at least equivalent of something else. There should be something special about you to do it. Giving it to a giant is my way of mitigating that. That's so terrifying. His reach, he can move that thing around because he's so big, he's so strong. He can move it around like it's a normal sword. That's terrifying. That's so much strength. That's so much power just wrapped up in one guy. And so I wanted to give him a great sword because I try to use them very rarely. I try not to just hand a two-handed swords I'm okay with, but the full-on, like, big deal, like, comes up to your shoulder type sword, that should be something reserved for a truly dangerous character. And a truly physical character, what better, physicality to give than to a giant. So the other thing, I'll put his design back up, his armor. So I had these weird, like I said, I had this weird angular design for him where everything's sort of up and down, but I wanted to leave a lot of open spots. I didn't want to totally cover him in armor, but I also didn't want to leave him unarmored, because armor it adds to that factor. It gives you that martial idea, it tells you that this guy is no one to be trifled with. It gives the impression of invulnerability. But I wanted to leave parts of him open. You can see I gave him just sort of leather around his legs and kind of those open spots in his arms, because I wanted him to also feel like he could really move. Usually big creatures like this, they're beaten by their bumbling nature. You'll see a troll or a giant or whatever just kind of tripping over themselves, or like the hero like dashes between his legs. But if you were that big and that was just your body, you might be a little gangly because you're large. Like if you just want to factor real world physics into it, they'd be a little bit goofy. But in a fantasy world, they should move like a person, which means they should be moving and hitting and being able to really like kick and fight and throw. They should be way more than a match than any human being, no matter how strong they are, can beat without something really, really upping the ante for them. So this character specifically, he's not just a frost giant, he has a name, because I've thought a lot about him and what I would want him to be and to do. Like I said, he's kind of a white whale character to me. He would either be a villain whose purpose is that he can't be surmounted physically. And I don't mean that in the traditional, like, you can't beat him unless you're a true hero, or like you get the object of whatever thing, the MacGuffin you need to beat the seemingly invincible bad guy. He would be a villain that you have to beat in a way other than violence. Going back to that original idea of the Frost Giant. So if you imagine a story where this guy is the key villain, for whatever reason, he's holding a town hostage, or he's like the bad guy leader of whatever. Like I said, he's the white whale. I've never nailed down a perfect use for him. But so you've got this guy as the villain, but how do you, a regular person in a fairly non-magical world, deal with him? You have to find out what he wants. He would be the end of a tale about diplomacy, or maybe about human nature, about finding what he needs and helping him do that. Because you'd have to incorporate him, bring him in. You'd have to get him somewhat in your ballpark to understand and talk to you, because you just couldn't fight him. It would be ridiculous. It would be silly. Even a group of people. If you had, generally speaking, numbers beat raw power, but even if you had like a dozen dudes, like somebody who if a normal person comes up to like your knee, or even up to your waist, the size and power you have, it would be like you as an adult with a great sword armor just fighting children. Strong children, doesn't matter. They're still children. There's nothing they could do to defeat you. So a group of people shouldn't feel like they should beat them. He should be incorporated from a storytelling perspective. That's my idea with him. Alternatively, I would use him as a hero in a story where his physicality is irrelevant. So you wouldn't see him fighting. It wouldn't be an action-y story, because he's a character where physical action isn't input. He's like Superman. What's the point of making him wrestle someone? It doesn't matter. Most of the things about him, you would use him for storytelling. So it gives a lot more validation to a character when they do not, moreover if they cannot, just solve problems with violence. But it's a step even further when they have that option but don't resort to it. So Wagland I would like to use as a sort of Gulliver's Travels type character, not in the size thing, but in just the idea of going to different places and people reacting to him, people treating him this way or that way, some people naturally would be terrified of him. Some people would hate him. Some people would like him. Some people would enjoy him. Some people would see, whoa, what's that guy? And if he talked to them, they would be like, this is amazing, and be in awe, if not reverence, of what he is and what he can do. So he would be an excellent character to take on somewhat of that hero's journey type story, but minus the naivete, minus the general, the hero's journey. Generally, your main character starts very weak and somewhat hapless. I wouldn't want Wagland to be that way. I would want him to be dangerous right from the beginning, to make it feel good when he doesn't use his strength to solve things, and to make it incredibly validating when he does. When occasionally you have a moment where it's like, okay, no answers but violence. So here we go. Here comes Wagland. He gets to take that sheath off his back, drop it on the ground, pull that sword out, and just go to town on somebody. It would be this hugely gratifying moment because he would be in a story that never uses violence. Anyway, that's my idea. Frost Giant. Those are my thoughts on it. Hopefully one day I'll find a good use for him. Maybe I will, maybe I won't, but it's an interesting concept. So let me know what you think. Throw at me in the comments. Hero, villain, tell me what you like better. Either way, that'll be the end of this episode, so we'll catch you guys next time on Design Workshop.